On the night of August 23, 1988, $3.6 million vanished from the Cypress Harbor Yacht Club in Miami, Florida. The money disappeared during one of the most extravagant parties South Florida had ever seen. A celebration hosted by platinum-selling rapper Darnell D. Smooth Patterson. 200 guests danced on the deck of a 180-foot yacht, while champagne flowed and diamonds glittered under the Miami moonlight. But while the music pounded and the celebrities mingled, someone was executing one of the most audacious robberies in Florida history. The theft remained unsolved for 27 years. Federal investigators interviewed hundreds of witnesses, analyzed thousands of hours of surveillance footage, and followed leads that stretched from Miami to the Bahamas. The FBI's Art and Theft Recovery Unit classified it as one of their most frustrating cold cases. The money had simply evaporated into the humid South Florida air, along with whoever had taken it. What made this case extraordinary was not just the amount stolen or the high-profile setting. It was the fact that the man responsible had been standing on that yacht the entire night, dressed in a crisp white server's uniform, serving mojitos and collecting empty glasses. His name was Jerome Washington, and for 27 years, he lived a quiet, unremarkable life in the Overtown neighborhood of Miami, working as a marine equipment technician. He never moved away, never splurged, never drew attention to himself. He became invisible by remaining exactly where everyone had already looked. The case only broke open in August 2015, when a Miami-Dade police detective named Rita Morales was investigating an unrelated jewelry theft at a pawn shop in Little Havana. Among the items recovered was a distinctive gold chain with a custom pendant, a miniature yacht encrusted with tiny diamonds. The design was unmistakable to anyone familiar with Miami's hip-hop scene in the late 80s. It was a promotional piece that D. Smooth had commissioned specifically for his Cypress Harbor party, given only to his inner circle and certain VIP guests. Only 12 of these chains had ever been made. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Jerome Washington grew up in Liberty City, the third of 5 children raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at Jackson Memorial Hospital. He was a quiet, observant child who excelled at taking things apart and putting them back together. By the age of 14, he could repair boat engines, rewire electrical systems, and diagnose mechanical problems that stumped adults twice his age. His high school guidance counselor told his mother that Jerome had the kind of mind that could take him anywhere, to engineering school, to a career with NASA, to any future he wanted. But Jerome's future narrowed considerably in the spring of 1984, when his older brother, Dennis, was killed in a drive-by shooting outside a corner store on 62nd Street. Dennis had been the family's success story, 2 years into a business degree at Florida Memorial College, with plans to open an auto repair shop. His death sent their mother into a depression from which she never fully recovered, and it left Jerome, then 19 years old, as the family's primary breadwinner. Jerome dropped out of Miami-Dade Community College and took a job at Blackwell Marine Services, a company that maintained boats and yachts for Miami's wealthiest residents. He started as a general laborer, cleaning bilges and scraping barnacles, but his mechanical aptitude quickly became apparent. Within 2 years, he had been promoted to lead technician, responsible for maintaining the complex electrical and hydraulic systems on luxury yachts worth millions of dollars. The work paid decently, enough to support his mother and younger siblings, but it also gave Jerome an education in a different kind of wealth. He spent his days in the engine rooms and equipment bays of vessels that cost more than his entire neighborhood was worth. He watched owners casually spend $50,000 on teak deck refinishing or $75,000 on upgraded navigation systems. He saw teenagers treating $100,000 jet skis like disposable toys. Jerome never spoke about the resentment that built inside him during those years, but his sister Teresa would later tell investigators that he changed after Dennis died. The quiet teenager became even more withdrawn, more focused, more calculating. He stopped going out with friends. He spent his evenings studying electrical schematics and security system manuals that he borrowed from work. When Teresa asked him why he needed to know about alarm systems, he told her he was trying to qualify for a better position. By 1987, Jerome had become one of the most trusted marine technicians in South Florida. Yacht owners specifically requested him for complex repairs and system installations. He had full access to their vessels, often working alone for hours at a time in the most sensitive areas of the boats. He never stole anything, never gave anyone reason to doubt his integrity, but he was learning, watching, cataloging every vulnerability in every system he encountered. The Cypress Harbor Yacht Club occupied prime real estate on Biscayne Bay, a gated facility where membership started at $50,000 annually. The club maintained 20 permanent dock slips for the largest yachts, along with additional moorings for smaller vessels. Security was considered excellent, with a guardhouse at the entrance, surveillance cameras throughout the property, and a sophisticated alarm system connected directly to the Miami Beach Police Department. In May of 1988, Blackwell Marine Services won a contract to perform routine maintenance on 12 yachts docked at Cypress Harbor. Jerome was assigned as the lead technician. Over the next 3 months, he spent nearly every weekday at the club, sometimes working from sunrise until well after dark. He became a familiar face to the security guards, the dock staff, the club managers. They waved him through the gate without checking his credentials. They gave him unrestricted access to every part of the facility. During those 3 months, Jerome learned things that the club's security director never imagined anyone outside the inner circle would know. He learned that the surveillance system, state-of-the-art when installed in 1983, recorded to VHS tapes that were changed every 72 hours. He learned that the tapes were stored in a locked cabinet in the security office, but that the cabinet key was kept in the desk drawer because the head of security found it inconvenient to carry multiple keys on his belt. He learned that the alarm system had a 45-second delay between door opening and alert trigger, designed to give authorized personnel time to enter their access code. Most importantly, Jerome learned about the club's vault. Cypress Harbor was more than just a yacht club. It functioned as a private bank for its members, offering secure storage for jewelry, cash, important documents, and other valuables that the wealthy preferred to keep accessible rather than locked away in commercial bank vaults. The vault itself was located in the administrative building, 2 floors above the main reception area. It was a converted office with reinforced walls, a serious commercial door with both a combination lock and a key override, and its own dedicated alarm sensor. Jerome learned the vault's access procedures by simply watching and listening. The club's business manager, an efficient woman named Patricia Holcomb, opened the vault every Tuesday and Friday morning to accommodate member requests for access to their safe deposit boxes. Jerome, working on an electrical panel in the hallway outside her office, observed that she kept the vault combination written in what she thought was code inside her desk planner. The numbers were disguised as phone extensions, but Jerome recognized them from the club's employee directory. They were not legitimate extensions. He wrote them down. He also learned, through casual conversation with Patricia's assistant, that the club would be hosting D Smooth's birthday party on August 23rd. The rapper, at the height of his fame following the success of his album South Beach Nights, had rented the entire club for the evening, including the largest yacht in the marina, a vessel called the Endless Summer that belonged to a real estate developer who was spending the summer in Europe. The party represented an opportunity that Jerome understood might never come again. On a normal night, the club was quiet after 8 p.m. with just a skeleton crew of security and maintenance staff. But on the night of the party, there would be chaos. 200 people, catering trucks, limousines coming and going, music, lights, distractions everywhere. Security would be focused on the guests, on keeping out crashers and paparazzi, on managing the crowd. No one would be watching the administrative building. Jerome spent 6 weeks planning every detail. He obtained a catering uniform from a rental company in Hialeah telling them he needed it for a film production job. He studied the yacht club's catering protocols, learning how the servers moved through the facility, where they took their breaks, how they accessed different areas of the property. He drove past the club at different times of night, noting when security guards made their rounds, timing the gaps in their patrol patterns. The riskiest element was the vault combination. Jerome needed to verify it, but he could not simply walk up to the vault and try it during business hours. Instead, on a Saturday afternoon in late July, he volunteered to work overtime to troubleshoot an electrical problem on one of the yachts. The club was nearly empty, with just one security guard on duty and no administrative staff. Jerome worked on the yacht for an hour, legitimately fixing a generator issue, then returned to the administrative building, carrying his toolbox and wearing his Blackwell Marine uniform. The security guard saw him enter and did not question it. Jerome was part of the furniture by then. He climbed to the second floor and walked directly to the vault. His heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat, but his hands were steady. He spun the combination dial, following the sequence he had memorized from Patricia Holcomb's desk planner. The mechanism clicked smoothly through each number. On the third rotation, the bolt retracted with a satisfying thunk. Jerome did not open the door. He simply stood there for a moment, breathing carefully, processing what he had just confirmed. Then he spun the dial to relock the mechanism and walked back to his truck. The entire detour had taken less than 3 minutes. If anyone had asked what he was doing on the second floor, he would have said he was checking the building's electrical panel, which was actually located at the far end of the hallway. No one asked. August 23rd, 1988, fell on a Tuesday, unusually hot even by Miami standards, with temperatures pushing into the mid-90s and humidity that made the air feel like a wet blanket. Jerome woke at 5 in the morning in his small apartment on Northwest 3rd Avenue. He had not slept well, drifting in and out of a restless half-consciousness where he repeatedly rehearsed the evening's plan. He made coffee, scrambled eggs he barely tasted, and sat at his kitchen table reviewing a handwritten checklist he had created over the previous weeks. At 10 a.m., he called in sick to Blackwell Marine, telling his supervisor he had food poisoning and would not be able to work. This was crucial. If anything went wrong, if he was caught or identified, there needed to be no employment record placing him at Cypress Harbor that day. His supervisor, who had never known Jerome to call in sick, accepted the explanation without question and told him to feel better. Jerome spent the afternoon in a kind of calm detachment, moving through his apartment like a man in a trance. He ate a light lunch of chicken and rice. He showered, shaved carefully, and trimmed his fingernails. At 4 p.m. he dressed in dark slacks and a dark long-sleeve shirt. He packed a small duffel bag with the catering uniform, a pair of latex gloves he had purchased at a hardware store, a small LED flashlight, and a canvas messenger bag that could be folded flat when not in use. He drove to Cypress Harbor in his 10-year-old Honda Civic, arriving at 6:45, just as the party preparations were reaching their peak. Catering vans crowded the service entrance, and Jerome simply fell in line with the confusion, parking among the delivery vehicles. He pulled on the white catering jacket over his dark clothes, draped a serving towel over his arm, and walked through the service entrance as if he had every right to be there. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. The catering manager was screaming at someone about insufficient ice. A florist was arguing with a club employee about where to place tropical flower arrangements. Jerome moved through the chaos like smoke, visible but unnoticed. Just another server preparing for just another event. He made his way to the main building and climbed the staff stairwell to the second floor. The administrative offices were empty, dark, exactly as he had expected. The party was entirely focused on the marina and the yacht. No guests would have any reason to be in this part of the facility. Jerome entered the vault room at 7:18. He checked his watch to note the time, a habit from his marine technician work where timing was everything. He put on the latex gloves and spun the combination dial, the sequence so deeply memorized that his fingers moved almost without conscious thought. The vault door opened. The interior was smaller than he had expected, perhaps 12 feet by 12 feet. lined with safe deposit boxes and equipped with a small table and chair for members who wanted privacy when accessing their valuables. But Jerome was not interested in the safe deposit boxes. His research had revealed something else, something that Patricia Holcomb's assistant had mentioned casually during a conversation about the club's insurance policies. Cypress Harbor maintained an operating cash reserve in the vault, money used to pay vendors, handle member requests for large cash transactions, and cover the various financial needs of running an exclusive private club. The reserve was typically maintained at around $200,000, replenished monthly by armored car delivery. But in late August, the reserve was always larger, swollen by member deposits related to end-of-summer expenses, insurance settlements, and the settlement of various business transactions that the wealthy preferred to handle in cash. Patricia Holcomb's assistant had complained about the extra paperwork this created, mentioning that the vault sometimes held as much as $4 million during late summer. Jerome found the cash in a large commercial safe inside the vault, a secondary security measure that he had anticipated. The safe used a mechanical combination lock, not electronic, which meant it was vulnerable to manipulation if you had time and knowledge. Jerome had spent 3 months practicing on a similar safe he had purchased from a locksmith supply company, teaching himself the subtle techniques of lock manipulation, feeling for the contact points where the wheels aligned. The yacht club safe took him 37 minutes to open. He worked by feel in near darkness, using only the smallest amount of light from his LED flashlight. Sweat ran down his back despite the air conditioning, and twice he had to stop and wipe his hands because his fingers were slipping on the dial. Outside, he could hear the party beginning, the thump of music, the murmur of voices, the occasional burst of laughter. The sounds were distant, muffled by walls and distance, but they served as a constant reminder that hundreds of people were nearby. The safe door finally swung open at 7:55. Inside were stacks of currency, bundled and organized by denomination, along with several cloth bags that clinked with the weight of gold coins. Jerome did not count the money. He simply transferred everything into his canvas messenger bag, working quickly but carefully, making sure nothing fell or scattered. The bag grew heavy, then heavier, until he could barely lift it. He left the safe door open, left the vault door open, and walked back down the staff stairwell. The messenger bag was slung across his chest under the catering jacket, the weight pulling at his shoulder. To any casual observer, he was simply a slightly heavy-set server, perhaps carrying extra supplies or equipment. He exited through the service entrance at 8:13, walking past security guards who were focused on checking credentials for arriving guests. Jerome drove home with the money on the floor of his back seat, covered with a beach towel. He obeyed every traffic law, stopped fully at every stop sign, used his turn signals religiously. The drive from Cypress Harbor to his Overtown apartment took 23 minutes in light evening traffic. He parked in his usual spot behind his building and carried the messenger bag inside as if it contained nothing more interesting than groceries. Money filled 2 large suitcases when he finally counted it in his bedroom with the door locked and the curtains drawn. $3.6,400,000, nearly twice what he had expected. There were also 3 bags of gold Krugerrands, worth perhaps another $200,000 at market prices. Jerome sat on his bedroom floor, surrounded by more money than his neighborhood saw in a year, and felt not triumph, but a deep, hollow anxiety about what came next. The theft was discovered at 9:15 the following morning, when Patricia Holcomb arrived to open the vault for a member request. Her scream brought security running. Within 20 minutes, Cypress Harbor was locked down, with police blocking every entrance and FBI agents already being notified. The party the previous night meant that dozens of potential suspects had been on the property, along with caterers, musicians, photographers, and various other contractors. But the administrative building had been far from the party, and reviewing the surveillance footage showed no guests entering that area. The investigation quickly focused on the catering staff. FBI agents interviewed every server, every bartender, every person who had been working the event. They collected fingerprints, compared employment records, checked backgrounds. Several servers had minor criminal records, mostly drug possession or DUI charges, which made them persons of interest. But none of them had the sophistication to crack a vault and manipulate a mechanical safe lock. That required specialized knowledge, the kind of expertise that suggested an inside job or a professional crew. Investigators interviewed Jerome Washington 3 weeks after the robbery, a routine conversation that was part of their systematic review of everyone who had regular access to Cyprus Harbor. Jerome, still employed by Blackwell Marine, sat calmly in an FBI field office and answered every question with straightforward honesty. Yes, he had worked at the club all summer. No, he had not been present the night of the party because he had been sick with food poisoning. Yes, he understood how vault systems worked because of his technical background, but he had never accessed the administrative building's upper floors. No, he had never had any financial problems or unusual expenses. The FBI agent conducting the interview, a veteran named Robert Chen, found Jerome unremarkable. Polite, cooperative, clearly intelligent but not flashy about it. His financial records showed a man living within his means, supporting his family, saving a modest amount. There were no red flags, no suspicious deposits or purchases. Chen thanked him for his time and moved on to the next name on the list. Jerome had prepared for this possibility with the same methodical care he had applied to the robbery itself. He had not touched the money in the 3 weeks since the theft, letting it sit in the suitcases under his bed like a bomb that could explode at any moment. He continued working his normal job, maintained his normal routines, gave investigators absolutely nothing to notice. But he also knew that he could not simply stash millions of dollars in his apartment indefinitely. Cash required management, laundering, careful dispersal into the legitimate economy where it could be used without raising suspicion. This was the part of the crime that destroyed most thieves. They stole successfully and then immediately betrayed themselves by spending visibly, by buying cars or houses or jewelry that their legitimate income could never support. Jerome's solution was patience. He would later tell a police psychiatrist that the key to successful crime was understanding that the robbery itself was only the first step. The real work was the decades that followed, the slow, careful process of transforming stolen money into a legitimate life without ever drawing attention. His first move was to relocate a portion of the cash to more secure hiding places. Over a period of 6 months, Jerome purchased several large plastic storage containers and buried them in carefully chosen locations. One container went into the crawl space of an abandoned house in Liberty City, a property that had been vacant for years and showed no signs of redevelopment. Another went into a storage unit he rented under a false name in Fort Lauderdale, using fake identification he had obtained through connections in Miami's underground economy. A third was buried in a wooded area near the Everglades, wrapped in multiple layers of waterproof plastic and marked with GPS coordinates he memorized. He kept only $200,000 in his apartment, hidden in a false panel he had constructed in his bedroom closet. This was his operating fund, money he could access if he needed to disappear quickly or deal with an emergency. The rest, more than $3 million, was now distributed in a network of hiding places that only he knew about. The psychological weight of living with this secret was heavier than Jerome had anticipated. He found himself constantly hyper-aware of his surroundings, analyzing every conversation for hidden meanings, every knock on the door for the possibility that it was finally law enforcement coming to arrest him. He developed insomnia, lying awake for hours while his mind raced through contingency plans and worst-case scenarios. He stopped socializing almost entirely, worried that alcohol or a moment of carelessness might cause him to say something incriminating. But he also never broke character. To his family, his co-workers, and anyone who knew him, Jerome Washington was exactly who he had always been, a quiet, hard-working marine technician who supported his mother and siblings, who showed up on time for every shift, who never caused problems. He continued living in the same apartment, driving the same old Honda, eating at the same cheap restaurants. The only change anyone noticed was that he seemed even more withdrawn than usual, but his sister attributed this to ongoing grief over their brother Dennis. Jerome began laundering small amounts of the money through a technique he had researched carefully. He purchased money orders in amounts under $3,000, buying them from different locations around Miami, always paying cash. He used these money orders to pay his rent, his utilities, his car insurance, and other legitimate expenses. The money orders created a paper trail that showed income, even though the income was fictional. He told his landlord he was doing freelance mechanical consulting work in addition to his regular job, an explanation that required no verification. He also began making cash purchases of items that held value and could be resold. Watches, small electronics tools, things that could be bought at pawn shops and flea markets without questions. He would hold these items for a year or more, then resell them through classified ads or at different pawn shops, creating the appearance of a modest side business. The amounts were small, never enough to draw attention, but over time they added up to a supplement to his legitimate income that explained any improvement in his lifestyle. The FBI investigation into the Cypress Harbor robbery remained active for nearly 4 years. Agents pursued dozens of theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and analyzed thousands of pieces of evidence. They brought in safe-cracking experts who explained that manipulating the mechanical lock on the vault's interior safe required years of practice and highly specialized knowledge. This suggested a professional thief, possibly with military or intelligence training. The FBI compiled a list of every known burglar and safecracker in Florida, interviewing those they could find and putting out alerts for those they could not. They never seriously considered Jerome Washington. His alibi for the night of the party was thin but consistent. He had been homesick, alone, with no one to verify his presence except a neighbor who vaguely remembered seeing his car in the parking lot. But there was no evidence connecting him to the crime, no fingerprints in the vault, no witnesses placing him at the scene, no suspicious financial activity. The FBI's profile suggested they were looking for an experienced criminal, probably someone with a record, definitely someone with connections to organized crime or professional theft rings. Jerome matched none of these characteristics. By 1992, the case was functionally cold. The FBI kept the file open, and an agent was nominally assigned to review any new leads, but no new leads materialized. The money had vanished as completely as if it had been dropped into the ocean. Patricia Holcomb, traumatized by the violation of the facility she had managed, left Cypress Harbor and moved to Atlanta. The yacht club increased its security, installing digital surveillance systems and hiring additional guards. But the improvements came too late to recover what was lost. Jerome continued his careful, invisible life. In 1993, he left Blackwell Marine and took a position with a smaller company that specialized in maintaining commercial fishing vessels. The work was harder and dirtier, but it came with less scrutiny and fewer wealthy clients who might remember his face from the Cypress Harbor days. He never mentioned his previous employer unless directly asked. He moved to a slightly better apartment in 1995, a 2-bedroom unit that cost only marginally more than his previous place. He bought a newer used car, a 7-year-old Toyota, after his Honda finally died. He took his mother to a nicer restaurant for her 60th birthday, spending perhaps $200 on a meal that she would talk about for months afterward. These were the only visible improvements in his circumstances, and they were modest enough to be explained by a man in his 30s who had been working steadily for more than a decade. The closest call came in 1997 when a routine IRS audit flagged some discrepancies in Jerome's tax returns. A revenue agent named Donald Cooper reviewed 3 years of Jerome's financial records, trying to reconcile reported income with apparent spending. The numbers did not add up perfectly. Jerome appeared to have slightly more money than his job should provide, though the gap was small, perhaps $5,000 or $6,000 per year. Jerome sat in Donald Cooper's office in downtown Miami and calmly explained his side business, selling refurbished tools and marine equipment. He provided receipts from pawn shops where he purchased items and classified ads where he had sold them. The receipts were genuine, part of the laundering system Jerome had constructed, and they showed exactly the kind of modest profit that Cooper's analysis suggested. Cooper reviewed the documentation, asked a few follow-up questions about Jerome's consulting work, and ultimately closed the audit with no adjustments. Jerome's tax returns were sloppy but not criminal. Cooper moved on to his next case. Jerome walked out of that office knowing how close he had come to destruction. An IRS audit could trigger deeper investigation, which could lead to financial forensics, which could ultimately unravel everything. That evening, he retrieved one of the storage containers from Liberty City and moved half its contents to a new location, a safety deposit box he rented under a false identity in West Palm Beach. He diversified his hiding places, spreading the risk even further. The years accumulated like layers of sediment, each one burying the crime a little deeper in the past. Jerome's mother passed away in 2003, her medical bills paid in full by her devoted son, who had somehow always found money when the family needed it. His sister Teresa moved to Orlando with her 3 children, and Jerome helped with their expenses, sending money orders for school supplies and clothes, playing the role of the generous uncle who worked hard and lived frugally. By 2010, Jerome was 51 years old, his hair going grey, his knees aching from decades of physical labor. He had moved to a modest house in the Brownsville neighborhood, a purchase he had saved for carefully, making a substantial down payment that came from years of legitimate work and, privately, from cash he had laundered through a complex series of transactions. The house was small, barely 900 square feet, but it was his, and it provided something his apartment never had: spaces where money could be hidden more permanently and securely. Jerome built false walls in the basement, creating cavities where cash could rest undisturbed behind legitimate insulation and drywall. He constructed a hidden safe in the concrete foundation, drilling the hole himself and installing a fireproof container that was virtually invisible once the floor was refinished. He moved the majority of the remaining money from storage units and buried locations into these new hiding places, reducing his risk profile by bringing everything closer to home, where he could monitor it constantly. He never married, never had children, never formed the kinds of close relationships that might lead to discovery. His life was defined by work, family obligation, and the massive secret that lived in his basement walls. He was not unhappy exactly, but he was not fully alive either. He existed in a permanent state of cautious vigilance, always aware that one mistake, one moment of carelessness, could destroy everything he had carefully constructed over decades. The transformation came in 2013, when Jerome was diagnosed with prostate cancer. The diagnosis was not immediately terminal, but it forced him to confront his mortality in a way he had avoided for 25 years. He was 54 years old, alone, sitting on millions of dollars he could never openly enjoy. He had successfully gotten away with one of the most sophisticated robberies in Florida history, and yet he lived like a man who earned $12 an hour fixing boat engines. Jerome began making changes. He retired from marine work, claiming disability related to his cancer treatment. He started traveling, taking modest trips to cities he had never seen, always paying cash for hotels and meals, never leaving a credit card trail. He visited New York, Chicago, New Orleans, places he had seen only on television. He told his sister the trips were possible because of retirement savings and a small settlement from his disability claim. Teresa was thrilled to see her brother finally enjoying life. He also made a decision about the gold Krugerrands. The coins were too distinctive to sell locally, too easily traced if the FBI was still monitoring precious metals dealers for signs of the Cyprus harbor loot. But he could sell them internationally, through dealers in the Bahamas who asked fewer questions about provenance. Over the course of 2014, Jerome made 3 trips to Nassau, each time carrying a portion of the gold coins in a carry-on bag, and sold them to a dealer who paid cash and kept no records. The transactions netted him nearly $250,000, money he used to pay for his cancer treatment, and to create a legitimate investment account that he could claim came from the gold sales if anyone ever asked. The gold chain pendant that would ultimately destroy him was a trophy. Jerome had taken the night of the robbery. It had been sitting on Patricia Holcomb's desk that night, forgotten in the chaos of party preparations. A promotional item from D. Smooth's people that was meant to be given to a VIP who had never arrived. Jerome had seen it glittering in the ambient light from outside, had picked it up on impulse, drawn by its craftsmanship and the way it caught the light. He had kept it for 27 years, hidden with the cash, a tangible reminder of the most significant night of his life. In March 2015, Jerome's cancer returned aggressively. His doctors gave him less than 2 years. Faced with this deadline, he decided to give the chain to his nephew, Dwayne, Teresa's oldest son, who was studying music production at a community college and dreamed of making it in the hip-hop industry. Jerome thought the vintage piece would appeal to Dwayne's aesthetic, a genuine artifact from Miami's golden age of rap. He gave it to him during a family dinner, presenting it casually as something he had acquired years ago from a client who could not pay for repair work. Dwayne loved the chain, wore it constantly, posted photos of it on social media with captions about old-school Miami style. He wore it to parties, to recording studios, everywhere he went. It became part of his identity, his signature accessory. 4 months later, Dwayne was mugged outside a club in Liberty City. 3 men took his phone, his wallet, and the gold chain. Dwayne filed a police report, listing the chain among his stolen property, describing it in detail because it had sentimental value from his uncle. The chain description went into the Miami-Dade police database, where it sat among thousands of other stolen property reports. The muggers sold the chain to a pawn shop in Little Havana within 24 hours. The pawn shop owner, following legal requirements, photographed the chain and uploaded its description to the statewide pawn shop database that law enforcement monitored for stolen goods. But the chain sat on a shelf for 3 weeks before Detective Rita Morales walked in, following a lead on a different theft case. Morales was a veteran detective with the robbery division, known for her encyclopedic knowledge of Miami's criminal history. When she saw the chain among the recovered items spread across the pawn shop's counter, something triggered in her memory. She picked it up, examined the miniature yacht pendant, studied the distinctive diamond arrangement. She had seen this design before years ago, in a case file she had reviewed when she was first assigned to the robbery division. Back at her desk, Morales pulled the Cypress Harbor file from archives, a thick accordion folder that had not been touched in more than a decade. There, among the evidence photos and witness statements, was a photograph of D. Smooth wearing an identical chain, taken at his birthday party the night $3.6 million vanished from the yacht club vault. The caption identified the chain as one of 12 custom pieces commissioned specifically for the event. Morales immediately contacted the FBI. Agent Sarah Martinez, who had inherited the cold case from Robert Chen after his retirement, reviewed Morales's findings and agreed to reopen the investigation. They began by tracing the chain's ownership history, working backward from the pawn shop to the muggers to Dwayne to Jerome. The interview with Dwayne yielded Jerome's name, and when investigators pulled Jerome Washington's file from the original investigation, everything suddenly clicked into terrible focus. The marine technician who had worked at Cypress Harbor all summer in 1988. The man with the technical skills to bypass security systems and manipulate mechanical locks. The man who had been supposedly sick the night of the robbery, but whose alibi was never strongly verified. Agents Martinez and Chen, who came out of retirement to assist, obtained a warrant to search Jerome's house in August 2015. 27 years and 2 days after the robbery, Jerome was home when they arrived, too weak from chemotherapy to run, even if he had wanted to. He sat quietly in his living room, while agents tore through his house with forensic precision. They found the money within hours. The false walls were professionally constructed, but not invisible to trained investigators using ground-penetrating radar. The basement safe yielded $2.1 million in cash, still bundled in many of the same bank wrappers that had been used in 1988. Behind insulation in the walls, agents found another $700,000, In a buried container in Jerome's small backyard, they found an additional $400,000. The total recovery was $3.2 million, slightly less than the amount stolen due to the money Jerome had spent over 27 years on living expenses, medical bills, helping his family, and the gold coins he had sold. Jerome Washington was arrested and charged with grand theft, burglary, and multiple counts of money laundering. He never went to trial. Jerome's health deteriorated rapidly in custody, and he agreed to a plea bargain in October 2015. In exchange for a full confession and the return of all remaining stolen property, prosecutors agreed to a reduced sentence and recommended medical furlough. Jerome Washington pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a sentence he would never serve. During his allocution, Jerome spoke clearly about his motivations and methods. He described the meticulous planning, the patience, the decades of carefully maintaining a cover story. He expressed no real remorse for the crime, but acknowledged that the psychological burden of hiding had been worse than prison could ever be. He apologized to his nephew Dwayne, whose innocent desire to honor his uncle's gift had unraveled everything. Jerome Washington died in a hospice facility in Miami on January 12, 2016, 4 months after his guilty plea and nearly 28 years after the Cyprus Harbor heist. He was 56 years old. His sister Teresa arranged a small funeral that was attended by family and a few former co-workers who remembered him as a quiet, decent man who had worked hard his entire life. The recovered money was returned to Cyprus Harbor Yacht Club's insurers, minus administrative costs and some bills that had degraded beyond use. D-Smooth, reached for comment by local news, said he barely remembered the party and had no memory of the pendant chains. Patricia Holcomb, contacted at her home in Atlanta, declined to comment. The case's resolution brought closure to one of Miami's most perplexing cold cases, but it also raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of expertise and opportunity. Jerome Washington was not a career criminal or a sophisticated thief. He was a skilled technician whose legitimate work gave him access to systems and vulnerabilities that most people never saw. He exploited that access with patience and intelligence, and he came within months of dying a free man. Jerome Washington died still insisting that he regretted nothing about the crime itself, only the burden of keeping the secret. He told his sister, in one of their final conversations, that he would have rather been caught immediately and served 20 years in prison than spent 27 years living as he had. But he also acknowledged that this was hindsight, that on that August night in 1988, standing in that vault with millions of dollars within reach, he could not have imagined any future beyond the moment of taking what was there to be taken. The case file, finally closed in 2016 after Jerome's death, contained thousands of pages documenting both the crime and the investigation. Future investigators and researchers would have access to every detail, every mistake, every lucky break that had led to resolution. The file represented not just one man's crime, but an entire era of Miami's history, captured in witness statements and evidence photos and surveillance footage. A time capsule of wealth and crime and the thin line between them. For Miami itself, the case was a reminder of the city's complicated past and present, a place where enormous wealth and desperate poverty existed side by side, where opportunities for crime were matched only by opportunities for legitimate success, where the difference between the two paths could come down to a single choice made in a moment of resentment or need or simply curiosity about whether something difficult could be done. The Cyprus Harbor Yacht Club heist would never achieve the fame of bigger robberies or more violent crimes, but for those who studied it carefully, it offered insights into the human capacity for patience, discipline, and self-deception. Jerome Washington had proven that a person could execute a perfect crime and still lose everything that made the crime worthwhile. He had stolen millions and lived like a man with nothing. He had escaped justice for 27 years and spent every one of those years imprisoned by his own success. The gold chain that had betrayed him remained in evidence storage, A small piece of jewelry worth perhaps $5,000 that had ultimately been worth $3.2 million in recovered stolen money. It sat in a box labeled with case numbers and dates, a reminder that even the most careful criminals could be undone by the smallest oversight, by a gift given in a moment of generosity, by a nephew's bad luck on a street corner, by a detective's sharp memory. In the end, the story of Jerome Washington and the Cypress Harbor heist became a cautionary tale not about crime, but about the price of secrecy. He had proven that a person could steal millions and hide successfully for decades, but he had also proven that such hiding was its own form of punishment, perhaps worse than any prison sentence could have been. He died having never truly enjoyed the wealth he had risked everything to obtain, having spent his entire adult life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the knock on the door that finally came 27 years too late to matter.